people could say hello in the chat, then I'll know that you can not only hear me, but actually that we are live. Oh, something's changed there. We must be. And I suppose the first thing would be if anyone has actually managed to watch the video I just put out. And if so, what did you think to the new style of intro? It's very much a work in progress. In fact, I am expecting and certainly hoping to be able to do more work on that and a new trailer in the next, well, few days, but then stroke few weeks, because there's some things I was trying over the last week or so that I think has actually been a bit of a dead end, and I think I may have found a better way of doing things. Unfortunately, with only a few days left of my holiday. Good evening, you two. Great stuff. So you can potentially hear me. At least the chat box is working. So, oh, hi, Critty Pup. I'm not sure I recognise your name, but I may do. I'm very bad with names. Sorry if I have already come across you. Hi, guys, and Frozen Mess as well. Frozen Men's even. And... oh, good. You like the new intro. That's good. So I'll show you a few others, actually. I did say I'll show a few. I am going to be doing... I keep saying I'm going to... I've been intended to do a new subscriber report for weeks, for the last few weeks. Unfortunately, every time I get to the weekend, I think, right, I'll do one now. Then I always think to myself, I'm now going to do... there's something else I want to try out. Oh, I'd better try it first and then do the subscriber report. No, I'll do it then and then. You don't know how to send me messages on Twitch. Oh, okay. So I'm sure someone could help you with that. I'm pretty sure you just click there. Let me just try. Hold on. So if I click on your name... I click the name and click whisper. That should do it. Hang on a minute. I'm trying to avoid blocking you. I have to be careful. Pinnacle look promising. Ah, well, it's funny you should say that. So yes, so I was looking at Pinnacle Studio, and it looked like it had some features like 3D text that I would want. So I was looking at a few reviews. The first review I came across was by someone whose channel name is Pinnacle Studio, and there's an affiliate link down below to buy it. So I thought this person may be a little bit biased. But I watched it anyway. It looks quite good. Then I watched another review by someone directly comparing it with Adobe Premiere Elements. I thought, oh, fantastic. They'll show me what's different. It wasn't as good quality, the review, but obviously the content matters more. And... interestingly, he was talking about now After Effects. Adobe After Effects is something I've come across before. And the last time I saw it, it's one of these super expensive ones. But it can do so many good things I've seen. Like, really good. But two problems with it. One, stunningly expensive. Two, requires a high level of technical expertise. In other words, you've got to practice it a lot. Maybe read manuals, look at tutorials, that sort of thing. The second part I'm not so bothered about, because I can do that. So I was looking at the thing, and he was talking about a subscription that you could get. So I've looked into it, and actually you can. So for £20 a month, I've got access to After Effects, which is a lot better than paying £1,000 for the actual software. So I'm giving that a go to begin with. Now, just like the guy said in the review, it's not as user-friendly. I cannot work out how to do the stuff in it, but that's fine because I'll look at some tutorial videos. So that's one of my jobs to do potentially for tomorrow, or for the rest of this week. Start off with one thing first of all. Start off with 3D text, but it looks, yeah, I might actually have some more tools coming. I have to learn how to use them though. It's not user-friendly. It's absolutely not user-friendly, but it can do so much stuff, so I'm looking forward to that. I wish I'd have thought about it or been aware of that like a week and a half ago, when I could have had the whole of the 2 and a bit weeks to have a play with it. So let's have a look. So Sasha, just finish watching the video on personal loot. There was one thing I meant to say in that video and I completely forgot to say before I just go to your actual question. Or statement, I should say. The thing I meant to say in it, I had it in my notes and I don't know how I missed it, is it's worth bearing in mind as well, when people are thinking back into Legion where we had, like I've had this lots of times, but the most extreme example of this was early on in Legion. I have Ashara, At the end of it, I got a really high item level ring. It had mastery on it. Now, for me, it was not an upgrade, because this is when secondary stats were in a woeful state. It wasn't an upgrade, so I couldn't wear it. There was a warrior in the group for whom it was a big upgrade, but I couldn't trade it to them because it was such a high item level. That is much less likely to happen, if basically not happening at all, because in BfA, they have actually improved it a lot. Now, with rings, we can't say for certain, but in general gear, primary stats are worth so much more than secondary stats that actually that should be largely done away with. Obviously, rings, yeah, that's a special case because of the secondary stats, but it should still be a lot better from that point of view. So, anyway, coming to your statement first. So, you think we need a system where all loot is good, as in you can turn it into something to increase the power of your character and remove loot trading entirely? Yes. Now, that's another thing I want to do a video on. The whole concept of, instead of getting individual pieces of loot, that you work your way up to it or something. I sort of quite like the idea of as well, because I suppose it all depends on what the interest is in loot. Now, obviously, there has to be a time element to it. You can't have loot be too efficient, but at the same time, some people will argue that the RNG nature of it is an interesting part of the game as well, and some people won't. But I would, you know, the war mode system of gearing, I quite like the idea of. So for those who don't know, with war mode on, when you're doing your stuff, you're filling up a bar with your conquest points or whatever the hell. And at the end of the bar, you get a piece of loot. Fantastic. Then at the end of the next bar, you get another piece of loot and blah, blah, blah. Once you've got the whole set, and you don't get duplicate pieces as far as I can tell. Once you've got all the items in that set, next time you fill up the bar, you get a piece of equipment on the next tier up in that gear, so a better piece of gear. That sounds like a really good system, and it's a system that could work in PvE as well. It's an absolutely system. It's a system that could work in dungeons and raids, like separately, of course. You know, I can see that being really good, but some people may not like it because it removes the situation where you could get your BIS item dropping in the first week of a new raid tier. Or you might be waiting the whole raid tier and never get it, you know. Because some people do like that, though. They like that. Anticipation. You could argue there's less anticipation with this way because you know you're going to get a piece. And although you might not know exactly which piece it is, you know you're going to get a piece at a set time. I suspect Blizzard would say that they wouldn't like that because of the, you know, the lack of anticipation. Fix is simple, remove all secondary stats. They wouldn't, though. I mean, in some games they have sort of done that. They've simplified the secondary stats, and that would fix it. But there are, again, a lot of people who like the interactivity with the secondary stats, and Blizzard themselves like it. So I think, I don't think they would entertain the thought of actually getting rid of it at all. How's Ret looking in Legion? We had a whole video on how Ret's looking in Legion. So, you know, you'll have to check out the video that Sol Sacra joined me for on the live Ret Q&A last weekend. But in a nutshell, very good. Excellent, in fact. Better than Legion, certainly. We both agree on that one. Hi, Fraser. The thing that drives you crazy about personal loot is not being able to trade loot if it's crap for you, but if it's a high level, can't do anything about it. So, yeah, Higpig. I mean, that is the issue with it. But as I said, in BfA, that's less likely to be the case. Things that are an item level upgrade for you are more likely to be an actual upgrade for you, even if it's not the BIS item. Because they seem at the moment to... They've fundamentally changed the way stats work in BfA, which means that your primary stats will be much more important than your secondary stats. The issue becomes when you're talking about the differences between different secondary stats. Rings is still the extreme example. Trinkets, obviously, again, for which stats are the lesser concern and may not even have a primary stat on it. So rings and trinkets may still be a bit iffy. But for everything else, if it's higher item level, it probably will be an upgrade. Fingers crossed. It looks at the moment like they've sort of cracked that problem. But not necessarily for rings and trinkets. Let's have a look, sorry. Wouldn't be a straightforward fix. Oh, hello. For the loot drama with personal loot. Yeah, the loot drama is an issue. I think guilds, where there's going to be a lot of loot drama, it's where guilds don't consider the consequences of it. And they just YOLO it. Or maybe some guilds just think to themselves, oh, there's nothing we could do about it. It's personal loot. And they don't think about situations or scenarios that could arise. So that is asking for loot drama. If these things are thought about in advance and there's a policy, your guild needs a policy on loot. And if they have a policy and it's rigidly applied, that should reduce the amount of loot drama. Basically nullify it completely, you would hope. Don't add secondary... There are no secondary stats on Azerite gear, so you don't have to worry about that. It only has primary stats and the Azerite traits. So there's no issue there. You just hope islands, warfronts, etc. won't become mandatory to get Azerite. So do I. Or more specifically, I hope that we don't... The thing is, what's quite interesting is... In Legion, artifact power was for one thing and one thing only. It was to empower our weapon. And that's why we had to farm so much of it. In BfA, Azerite has at least two purposes. It's for empowering our necks so that we can get access to the levels needed to unlock the Azerite traits. But also, it can be used as resources to turn in for the war fronts. Now, that suggests that there's an that suggests there's a situation where we won't be able to keep putting it onto our Heart of Azeroth neck. In other words, the people who rush to get loads of it early on will come to a point where it's full, and until the next patch update, they won't need to use their Azerite on it. So instead, they can use it for other things. Now, I hope it's for more than just turning in. But that suggests to me that maybe we won't have to go after Azerite in the same way we had to do for AP. But that's just speculation on my part. You know, it has some basis in... I'm not just making it up. But we haven't had Blizzard specifically say that. And even if someone asked them directly, they would probably say, oh, yeah, you don't. But they also would have said you didn't have to farm AP like we did. Which, if you're Raider, isn't true. If you want to truly fix loot, make everything... item level, literally item level. Yeah, but they're not going to, because there's downsides to that situation as well. Your thought is the removal of master loot is for reasons at a higher level than you're looking at. Blizzard's dropped the ball on raid difficulty in split runs, and therefore master loot and mythic plus are the cause. They failed to predict the item level players before Emerald Nightmare. Well, that's certainly true, and it did get smashed. They upped the difficulty for Nighthold and overshot. I don't think Nighthold was terribly bad though. For that. Tomb of Sargeras was worse for the over-tuning of things, especially Kill Jaden. Because with Emerald Nightmare, I mean, if you looked at the two toughest bosses, or even the three toughest bosses, they would take Star Augur, but then Elisand and Gul'dan, with those bosses, when you got to those bosses later on in progress terms and you overgeared it, the fights got significantly easier because you eliminated whole mechanics. Whereas in Tomb of Sargeras, you didn't. So even if you had more gear because you took longer to get to likes of Mistress, Fallen Avatar, Kill Jaden, you still had to deal with all the same mechanics. You know, obviously more gear meant you pushed phases a bit easier. That always makes it easier. But you didn't get away with any mechanics. You still had to do all of them. So Tomb of Sargeras was worse for that, or worse or better, depending on whether which system you think should actually exist. The delta in gear between the top guilds and those middle of the pack mythic guilds is large. Well, at the start it is. I mean, it's always been the case that the other guilds will have more gear by the time they kill the later bosses than the first guilds did, of course. But the issue was that the gear you had when you were defeating like the end bosses was higher than the gear that it drops. That's the issue. It's like you could defeat Mythic Argus, say, and the gear that drops isn't necessarily an upgrade. Like, for example, I got, when we killed Mythic Argus quite recently, I got a Holy Relic from it, right? And it was an upgrade for me. It was quite nice in the end. But I was fairly sure it would be an upgrade for me. But it might have been more of a side grade, depending on what it got from the Netherlight Crucible. So it wasn't an absolute guaranteed upgrade. In the end, it was. I mean, it was quite like, it was more than 50% chance of being an upgrade. But it wasn't absolutely certain. Whereas it should be, you know, you should know. And okay, that's a particular issue with relics in the Netherlight Crucible. But there were other items as well that people weren't necessarily all that bothered about. In fact, I actually got a second piece of gear from Argus. There's the non-tier legs, which I'm not wearing at the moment. I hope to wear in the future. I mean, I put it down for future use. Because I have a set of gear in mind that if I got particular pieces from, you know, the raid, that I would be able to use it when we re-clear certain bosses. But at the moment, in the here and now, I'm not using it. It's not a clear upgrade. Hi, JD. Oh, yes, thank you about the YouTube. Yes, thanks. I'm going to show you some when we've sort of come to a lull in the moment. At some point, it usually goes a little bit quiet. I'll show you some of the other intros I've been working on. Hi, Dutastic again. What neck enchantment do I want to use as ret? Well, see, right, okay. Here's where you go. If you go onto the Paladin Discord, it has all these things on the ret FAQ. But basically, probably trained soldier, all right, at the moment. Depends on the gear you've got, though. Does depend on the gear you've got. But if you're in, like, standard tier 21 stuff. Vaguely remember talking about some major theory crafters having discovered serious problem with offensive CDs. I had talked about it since. Basically what it is, it's as simple as this. If you are playing a class or spec, like, say, Fury Warriors, where having your offensive cooldown on the GCD is a major ball ache, there are ways to adjust the GCD. Obviously, the shorter your global cooldown, the better. And how do you shorten a global cooldown? With haste. And it basically creates a situation where those specs are going to be wanting to chase haste like you wouldn't believe. The value of haste massively increases. More than, and it will have a value greater than any secondary stat should have, is the major issue with it. So that's the biggest issue with that. It affects more the specs that have more and short, particularly, like the extreme example is if you have regular offensive cooldowns, like they've got a minute, you can use them every minute or something like that, and they're not necessarily, they don't last very long. So Pillar of Frost DKs, Battle Cry for like Fury, well, any Warriors, sorry, come to that. That sort of thing, you know, shortish duration, but, you know, short cooldown as well. Those sort of things, bit of an arsehole, so you want to shorten the gold cooldown, which means you're chasing haste. Which means you may turn down items where, you know, so in other words, item level is... remember multi-strike? Yeah, a lot of people liked multi-strike, but obviously they got rid of it. Blizzard, in Blizzard's view, it didn't really do anything major. Oh, thank you, big time. It didn't really do anything significant. In fact, I play Ret Paladin, it effectively works the same as our mastery, so it was like a double mastery effect. It's like we had mastery twice over, really. There was also some double dipping that went on now and then as well, which is awkward. And whereas versatility gets such a bad press because people would have rather versatility went by the wayside. But actually versatility is a useful stat, I think. I approve of versatility because, you know, the Vantus rune system in Legion, I think I've seen everyone at the moment, now that it's all but certain that we're not getting anything extra in Legion, obviously we now know we're not getting any raids or anything like that. We could forget about that. Long since forgotten about that. But it looks like we're not even getting any more story to go. So, yeah, everyone's started doing their sort of reviews now of Legion now that it's over. I should probably do mine at some point. But, I mean, one little lauded benefit, I think, of Legion has been the Vantus rune system. That's been a really good system. And again, it takes advantage of the versatility stat. The fact that you can use this thing, which increases versatility, which not only increases your output, your DPS or your healing, but also reduces the damage you take. Ideal for doing a progress boss, a tough progress, or any progress boss. So you just decide what is your toughest fight that week and use the Vantus rune for it. That's fantastic. That's a way of you customizing your raid to focus on a particular boss. Let's have a look. Hold on. What am I missing here? You're just happy you don't have to farm Mythic raids anymore to be competitive in Mythic Plus. Well, they did say that the best gear is still going to come from Mythic raids. So that may not be true. And also bear in mind, I mean, obviously, when Blizzard say something, it's not the same as actually doing it. You know, when they say they're going to do something, and I'm not saying they're lying, it's just that they sometimes... it doesn't work out. I'll give you an example as a comment someone just put on that video. Where is it? Where is it? So someone's replying here. Blizzard is also making having specific classes and specs important, which goes against class stacking. Now, and that's, you know, Blizzard have said that. So you might think, oh, Blizzard have said they're going to do this thing. That means there won't be as much class stacking. But it's all right saying that. The reality may be very different. If they end up with a situation where there are certain mechanics on the very tough bosses which a particular class, say a rogue or a hunter, which typically have been the case the last couple of expansions, can nullify, then the bottom line is that you are going to be stacking those classes if you are able to. So, you know, it applies to anything. Blizzard sometimes put something in order to achieve a particular player behaviour, but players don't always behave the way they think they will. Will guilty BfA choose to avoid all the drama with loot changes just by not letting people beg for items? I don't think that's the best way to do it. And the reason is because people will anyway. They'll just do it in whisper, or they'll just drop subtle little hints, or whatever it happens to be. I don't think you can... I think you have to manage it better than that. I mean, absolutely, if as a guild you decide you can't be arsed with all the hassle, you could put into place a system whereby you say it's up to the individual that gets the item, much more of an LFR style of play. It's up to the person who gets the item what they do with it. If they choose to keep it, then they can choose to keep it. Obviously, you can look fairly dimly on someone who would disenchant it if it's an upgrade to someone else. That's a bit shit. Yeah, I think it's better to manage it. But how guilds do that depends on... It's one of these risk-reward things, isn't it? How much benefit do you think there is in interfering with the loot distribution when it's personal loot, compared to how much hassle? And that's something where you have to bear in mind your own sort of raiders. So Blizzard said in a recent interview they're looking at making the UI better when loot drops. You bet they bake in the add-on called Personal Loot Helper, where it announces for the raid who can trade what. Well, no, you say I hate it. I hate that specific add-on because of the way it was used in like LFR and pugs and stuff like that. That being said, an add-on that is more designed to help like a guild leadership would be okay, but I don't think Blizzard would implement it. And the reason I say that is because there are so many add-ons that are so popular, and it constantly baffles me. I think to myself, why don't... This is clearly popular. Why don't Blizzard put that in the game so we don't have to use an add-on for it? And they just don't. They just don't do these things. So I think, you know, Blizzard just let the community come up with their... If the community has something, a tool, Blizzard are just happy enough for the community to develop that tool so they don't have to. It all comes back to what I was saying the other day about their website. Like, no one uses the World of Warcraft website to look up information. You know, when PAX was going on, how many people were actually looking on the WoW web, the official website, for news coming from it? No one, because there's nothing. You look at MMO Champion, you look at Wowhead. And Blizzard know that. You know, it's not a failure on Blizzard's part. They do it deliberately. Because there you've got some people doing it with Blizzard not having to pay them a penny. They just throw a few exclusive news items their way every now and then. And let them do interviews and stuff. And it's basically free marketing for them. So same with these add-ons. I don't think they, you know, they'll just let the community come up with what they want. If the community comes up with an add-on that they don't want to use, then in that situation, of course, they will do something to change it, like, you know, the Star Augur add-on for sorting out the constellations. Avoidance is a mandatory stat for high-end Mythic Plus, and you can only get it in Warforged. There's make one ways to get it. Some of the tertiary stats are indeed stunningly useful. I still curse the fact that I'm not getting... it's my own fault. I should do some pugs, I suppose, for Argus. I can't be bothered. Hate pugs. But, you know, obviously I still haven't got the legendary trinket, which would be really nice. And but avoidance and leech, yeah, are really, really nice stats. Vantage Rune could just be 3% damage dealt and minus 3% damage taken. They could, but again, you know, that's just boring. They could do that, but then there's still no reason to get rid of versatility. I just think versatility is a nice stat. It's not as interesting. It doesn't do anything interesting as haste, crit, or mastery, depending on what class you play. It never does anything interesting. It just does its thing. But I think I think it's a nice stat. Evening, Lamnakin. Inscription will let raid groups get those class raid-wide buffs. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be quite as good, though. It's a bit like Drums of War, isn't it? Isn't quite as good as Heroism. It might be the same thing. Oh, yes. That's true. Thank you, Lamnakin. Yes. I will be able to do my levelling while I'm off during summer. For the first time ever. The problem is, it was such good news in a way that I'm now thinking to myself, something's going to queer the deal. Something's going to happen that stops me being able to level during that week. But the first summer in, like, you know, 20 years. But something will happen. I don't know. Someone will develop some Stasi or Big Brother add-on that keeps track of the highest item level piece per slot. Oh, yes, that's what I mean. I was actually saying exactly that thing in that video. Someone is bound to create an add-on for that purpose. All right. So that people... Because obviously you can't just ask your raid group to own up who can trade stuff. The problem is here, and the other thing I said in that video is, you can imagine the situation. So somewhat, right, imagine this, right? I'm a rep paladin, okay? Let's say it happens to me. I wouldn't do this. I'm going to say I would not do this. But let's say a less scrupulous me, where as a rep paladin, you were to get the maximum possible Titan Forged Bis weapon drop for you. It's in your bags, okay? Now, let's say for some reason you happen to have another one of equal item level for whatever reason, but it's not quite Bis. Or let's say a trinket. Actually, a trinket's a better idea, because with a trinket you could easily have one at equal item level, but the one you've got and equipped is actually pretty mediocre, but the one that's just dropped is completely Bis, absolutely Bis. And you're going to be expected to throw that into the hat for the officers to distribute, and you might have to give it to someone else. There'll be a temptation just for those pieces. You can't do it all the time, otherwise people will be onto you. There'll be a temptation for you to just accidentally click on it, accidentally, right, and go, oh no, I've clicked on it, I've equipped it. Sorry guys, I can't trade it. So, you know, there's all sorts, I mean, there's all sorts of opportunities for drama with this system. There really are. You just hope that secondary stats never become more desirable than primary stats again. Well, yes, so do I. I mean, that's why, you know, having the offensive cooldown, the GCD, sort of works against that. That's the thing. They're doing, on one hand, they're doing this, putting the system in place so that it shouldn't work, and then they go and do something like that. But that obviously only affects so many classes and specs. And at the moment, we don't necessarily know by how much. It may not be hideous. I bet it is, though. You're okay with them being strong, but it became really frustrating when they outweighed primary stat 2 to 1 or 3 to 1. Yeah, in my case, in fact, I haven't run it for a while, but my primary stat is behind all my secondary stats at the moment. It's my lowest stat weight. It's ridiculous. And by some distance over the top one. So, yeah, it's pretty grim. The old WoW website 10 years ago was way better for a new player finding something useful. It was. I mean, at the moment, there's basically nothing on there. I go there for artwork every now and then. I mean, that's what brought this into sharp focus. I used a piece of artwork on the WoW website as a thumbnail. And someone was asking, oh, where did you get that? They weren't asking me specifically. They were just asking people, oh, can anyone tell me where you get that artwork from? I can't find it anywhere, they said. And it was on the front page of the World of Warcraft website. So, you know, people don't go there for anything to do with WoW. It's just, you know, it's weird. Nowadays, it's only used for marketing. I don't even know it's used for that, really. I don't really know what it's used for. Because for marketing, you've got Battle.net now, haven't you? Battle.net advertise, you know, all the new stuff comes on there. So, you know, what I've got on my Battle.net at the moment is Battle for Azeroth arrives August 14. Dev Insights, Island Explorations. That's it. That's the two bits. And then Breaking News, which is just about, you know, maintenance resets. So, Kasashi, yes, 7% instead of 10% stamina for the Fortitude Scroll. See, that's the issue with the scrolls. They're not going to be as good as the class buffs. So you're still going to be encouraged to have one of each of those classes in there. But that doesn't preclude class stacking, because some of those stats might be worthless. So, for example, 10% stamina, actually that's quite nice as a defensive buff. But let's say it's on a fight where that's not going to help you. It's a pure mechanics fight, and, you know, if you die to a one-shot where the 10% extra stamina won't save you on a mythic fight, say. In that case, obviously, I can't imagine a situation where you'd ever want to do without a priest anyway, regardless of that. But just say in theory, in that situation, you might be willing to sacrifice that class because the buff doesn't bring you anything, and you want to stack up with the ones that do help you out. That's the downside of defensive buffs, which is why, until it's in the alpha, I'm not going to believe it. But I am told that Ret Paladins are getting an offensive buff. No, actually, I'm not told that. I'm told we may be doing. Maybe. If we do, I'll be delighted, because they're always useful. They might just make it that personal loot is not tradable. I think, because they did talk about it a bit more. I mean, obviously, any system is up for tweaking, but I'm pretty sure that they said it's going to work as personal loot has in Legion. They're just basically removing master loot. To make it not tradable at all would be a bad move, because that would hurt a lot of people, you know. I'm not talking about raiders. That hurts far more people than just raiders. I mean, imagine running like LFR. Like, if I have to run LFR for some reason on my main, obviously any piece of loot I get is not going to be an upgrade. Because, you know, I'm not the sort of person who's going to get a 985 from LFR. So I'm quite happy to trade my stuff to anyone who asks for me. I don't put it up for rolls or anything like that. If someone wants it badly enough, they'll ask me, and I'll just give it to the first person who asks, unless I don't like them. And in that situation, it would be quite harsh if I wasn't able to trade it to them. That's just mean. And that's hurting casual players or players of low-level alts. Has Blizz said in any interview just how rare Azerite armor will be? No, they haven't. That's a good point, Ziggy. Will there be an armor piece dropping off every raid boss or one in every dungeon, etc.? That is an excellent point, to which I do not know the answer, I'm afraid. And no, I don't think anyone has asked that I have seen, and I certainly haven't seen a response on it. You wonder if you can get an Azerite armor piece in a raid mission chest. You couldn't get tier from it in Legion. Is there even going to be a raid mission chest? I'm not sure there is. There are going to be missions, but they said in BfA they're going to be scaled right back. But you see, that's another piece of content that at the moment is not testable in the alpha. So, although we've gathered the resources, I've got some war resources, which are what are order resources now. Not many, but there's not many sources of them. But the system for using them on isn't in the alpha yet. There's tons of artwork on the WoW subreddit. Yes, it does seem to be a place where a lot of people like posting artwork. But obviously, in terms of using it, I'm fairly sure I can use a Blizzard piece of artwork as a thumbnail without me having to be... Like, sometimes you get a piece of artwork and it's clearly a fan piece of artwork and you sort of think, but I don't know who did it, so I can't credit anyone, and it's a bit iffy then. Shouldn't really use other people's stuff without crediting them. But sometimes I just don't know. I can't just credit the website I got it from, because it may be secondhand and stuff like that. The loading screen even says, problems with the quest, can't find that one NPC. The WoW forums and other websites will help you solve any problems. Yes, of course they... Well, occasionally they do, to be fair. There are actually sometimes people on certain channels in the forums that basically seem to live there just to help people out with things like that. So that's possible. But I just don't think... You just don't get any discussions going on there, or not really. You know. In fact, when I had a look at the alpha forums a couple of days ago, the one on the front page that had the most responses to it was someone who posted that they think they have alpha, but they're not sure. Basically, they're downloading the alpha from their Battle.net. The reason they weren't sure is because they didn't get an email. Loads of responses to, you know, all saying the same thing, which was basically, yeah, if you can download it, then you've got it. You don't get an email necessarily as soon as you've got it. Why does it take pages full of responses for that? But it did. Hi, Irish Mashy. Thank you very much. What do I think about Blizzard's main concern being trying to try and diversify Mythic Plus groups versus raid groups? Haven't they already said? What do you mean by diverse there? Do you mean in terms of classes taken? See, they can be a little bit detached from reality at times. It's a bit like, what was someone saying on stream? Apparently, I haven't seen this myself, but someone was saying that a developer at PAX or something like that was saying, oh, you can do Agrimar without a DK. You know, to which a lot of people would, Mythic Agrimar that is, would go, eh? And apparently there's like one guild that's done it. There's a log of like one guild that's done it. It's not quite the same, you know, just because, and they will take that as, you know, that means anyone can do it, but it's not true. Just because a particular group who might have a couple of exceptional players who were able to use different classes to achieve the same effect, were able to do a fight, you know, without a particular class that makes it easy, doesn't mean to say that everyone can do that, you know. I mean, that's the reason for bringing when you say a particular class is needed on a particular fight, it's not that it's literally needed, it's that it makes it so much easier that it'll save you hundreds of wipes. I mean, that, you know, God, how many wipes did we have on Mythic Argus? And a lot of it was just because our composition was so bad. I mean, there were other issues as well, of course. But a lot of it, you know, if we'd have had a better composition, we could have knocked off 200 wipes at least off that. Maybe more. We don't think Blizz has any way to diversify Mythic Plus groups because you get 5 people. There is that as well. And the other thing is, like, they've said they've tried to if in terms of what you mean now, try to diversify Mythic Plus by removing certain abilities like AoE stuns from more groups to force people, I suppose, to come up with strategies that don't require it, and then they don't seem as essential. But it's not always true. Like, for example, in Mythic Plus, if you're thinking about it seriously, what are you definitely going to want? You're definitely going to want at least 2 people who can battle res. It's no good just having one, because what if they're the one who dies? So you want at least 2 that can battle res. You want someone with heroism. You can take drums at a pinch, but heroism's better. You know, ideally, at the moment, you would ideally, you could argue, at least want someone who can give you health stones, although you could always get health stones and not take the warlock. You know, but whatever makes a particular affix really easy as well, because that could change on week-to-week basis. And the higher up you push it, the more important it is to take those ones, isn't it? Let's have a look. You kind of liked the WoD mission chest where you'd get a piece of mythic loot after doing enough heroic bosses. Again, but that's the issue of getting gear that's better than the content you're doing, though. So, no. It's probably better the way it's been done in Legion. Hi, Fardian. Are you excited for personal loot? Well, see, in the guild I'm in, I would say it'll help us more than hinder us. Like, it's not the case that all mythic guilds are going to lose from this system. You know, given that we don't do split raids and given that we've had roster issues this tier, you could argue personal loot might have actually been an overall benefit. But for the more organised guilds, of course, it's a loss. When you say more gear drops from personal loot, it does now. Doesn't need to say it will in BfA, because how can you define more gear drops when there's, like at the moment, we can say more gear drops from personal loot than master loot, which is why it's probably a better idea to switch to personal loot once you've done your progress. Like, I don't know why we don't, for example, in our guild, because we get more loot that way. I don't know why we just don't switch to it. But the thing is, that's there to encourage us to use personal loot. When they no longer need to do it because we're forced to use personal loot, then, you know, they'll make it drop as many pieces as they want to make it drop. You hope it's optional or just for breadcrumbs? What? Oh, the missions. They said that there's not going to be any missions that time gate anything for you. That it's not going to be used to time gate any content for you. So those missions where you had to do so many before you could progress your Order Hall campaign, and obviously it took about 6 hours to do each one or whatever it was, those will be gone. Those won't be there. But in what is actually going to be there for missions, don't know. It's not in the alpha yet. It's a whole string of things that's just not in the alpha yet. So, sorry, I'm going to get far behind with these comments now. This is absolutely fantastic. I've never seen so many comments coming flying fast. Is the hype on BfA on shaky grounds? It's hard for people to find meaningful hook outside Iron Expedition Warfronts. No, I mean, hype by its definition is always on shaky grounds, because hype it implies looking forward to something, you know, too much, and therefore being disappointed. However, there's a lot that's genuinely different about Battle for Azeroth beyond just the extra content like the islands and the warfront. You know, this war mode, for example, fundamentally changes things. The personal loot thing, good or bad, fundamentally changes the way we will approach the game. And some guilds will, like when we have any sea change in a system, some guilds will get right onto it and take advantage of the new dynamic. Some guilds will be left behind because they'll still behave as if the previous system was in place, and they'll suffer as a result. They'll fail to take advantage. A bit like a business these days that doesn't have a website, you know, They're refusing to drag themselves into the modern world. Guilds that do better tend to be the ones that use more modern approaches, and every expansion will adapt. So I think there is a lot that will be very different. Whether you'll look forward to it depends on what you want from the game, and which bits of the content you'll like, and you know, how enjoyable they end up being. But there's enough different with BfA that it would be definitely interesting. You know, the whole Azerite system is fundamentally more interesting than artifact weapons. Whether it's a better system is another matter, but it's fundamentally more interesting. Ziggy, to be fair, the raid mission chest should be gone with no tier. What's stopping people from beating 13 raid bosses then log in twice a week to get free loot? Rinse and repeat. Or how many bosses it needs to be. I don't know. It might be a good question. Especially if you just pay to get boosted on like an alt or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly neutral on the gear chests. You know, I mean, there's a lot of ways when you think about the amount of gear we get. So I compare it to vanilla. In vanilla, a raid boss dropped. Well, the first raid boss has dropped 2 bits of loot for 40 people, 2, and then other ones later on dropped 3 and then 4. But it's still 4 pieces of loot at its best for 40 people. Now for 20 people, bosses typically drop 4 or 5 pieces. Added to which, you can use coins to increase the amount. So if people use coins on a boss, then that's more loot there from that. Then you've got your raid mission every 10 days. Then you've got your Mythic plus cash every week. So when you add all that together, you're actually getting quite a lot more gear than we used to. Lots more. So, you know, we've been desensitized to getting loot. Whereas you compare it to back in vanilla, where it was a pretty big thing to get a piece of loot. You know, it's very, very different. Oh, beating Garothi 13 times is worth it over struggling to get a 15 each week. Maybe. I died to death fog once. It was not my fault. I'd been in death fog 100 times and survived every single time. And then the one time I died, and my bubble had already been consumed on something else, I hasten to add, and everyone was very upset with me. When I must have died to that mechanic less than any other person in the raid. But there you go. I stopped doing it after that. Getting an extra piece of heroic loot from a mission every 2 weeks when you're raiding heroic every week. Hardly a bonus. And I mean, I'm neutral on the whole thing. I just think there's a lot of gear bloat in the game now compared to... Like, I mean, as I say, I remember back when it took you a bloody long time to gear your character up. And in fact, you probably would never gear your character up. You know, you'd probably start the next raid tier with quite a few bits from the previous raid tier still unobtained. Just because, you know, you were spreading it out. You know, you got fewer items of loot for a roster that was double the size of it is now. You've never been in a guild with the right mindset when it comes to handing out gear, and then they don't understand why we're progressing like we should be. It could be very frustrating. Yeah, well, in any sort of guild where people complain about the rate of progress and fail to do anything about it, that's the only thing I find frustrating. Like some guilds, if a guild is happy at the rate of progress it has and it accepts that although there's things it could do to improve it, there'd be downsides to it that is not acceptable to the overall guild, that's fine, that's okay. No problem with that. I have a bit of an issue when people say are not happy with the rate of progress, but at the same time won't do anything to improve it. Then that's just madness. But fortunately, I've tended not to end up in such guilds. Hi, James Bow. Your concern is that raiding will become the worst way to get gear for non-mythic raiders. I mean, we'll have to... In terms of where people will end up going for their loot, we'll have to see on that one. Blizzard did say at PAX that they're happy with Mythic Plus in terms of the item level it drops. So expect that to be similar. But also counterbalance that with the idea that Titan Forging should have a lower chance. So I know a lot of people will just run lots and lots of Mythic Pluses because if you do enough of them, you're bound to get the odd Titan Forge piece. There'll be fewer of those. So whether it becomes worth it from that point of view, I don't know. However, it's worth bearing this in mind. There was a certain point in Legion in particular where we all know, like, if you had a +7 more of souls as like a, or, you know, between a +7 and a +10, then, you know, as a casual player or maybe a crappy alt of a, you know, another player, you would have no problem getting a group for it because you'd have 4 mythic raiders to, you know, who would happily take you through that dungeon for the sake of that key because it was an efficient way of getting artifact power. The same thing may happen in BfA because of certain dungeons. If they have access to popular bits of Azerite armor, you know, then you may also find yours, you know, certain keys might be very useful to have, and you might find it easier to get groups to boost you through them for free. Hang on, what's this? What have I said? What did I say? The one time I comment on being basically immune to it. What? Have I missed something? I've missed something. Never mind. Action Man. Gearing doesn't bother you too much with the focus on bringing multiple classes, considering having a second character around for the raid balance. The quicker gearing makes that a bit easier. Yeah, see, I don't want to bring multiple classes. I sort of am open to the concept, and I did it a little bit this expansion, but not. It was very half-hearted. Next expansion, I am putting serious effort into maybe, as long as it's not too much of an arsehole, maybe keeping an alt geared for the purposes of if there's a fight in a tier where it would be clearly better than my ret, then alright, for that fight I'll bring this. You know, for example, Warlock on Coven or Rogue on Fallen Avatar type of thing. However, it means that I have to tie up 2 objectives. One, it has to be a class that I know is going to be super useful on those fights. So in other words, completely different strengths to the ret, otherwise there's no point. Secondly, it has to be one that there's no point if I don't enjoy playing it, because I definitely won't keep it geared then. So that's the issue I have. And that's why I keep trying these different classes and specs when I'm going to the alpha, because I'm trying to work out which one can I be bothered to play. Because I won't learn to play it brilliantly, I suspect, as long as I can play it to a decent enough mythic standard. You work on a software development team. Looking at the pace Blizzard is putting out content now, I think it's obvious they've switched from a waterfall style development to an agile development life cycle. So really think they pretty much only have the content that we'll do in the next year ready at launch, and then they will continue iterating. Oh, well, yeah, we know that. I mean, they've said as much with that. Absolutely. They said, for example, with Trial of Valor, that they only thought about doing that round about when Legion launched. That was just something they, you know, came with quite, you know, and that was a few months later. They brought that out just before Christmas. Your guild is small and casual and run Mythic Plus daily. It's your raiding alternative. Geared up quickly this way and suddenly hit a wall around +12. Does this happen to raid guilds hitting a wall in raids? Well, it does, but for a different reason. There's just certain bosses with Mythic raids, it tends to be based around mechanics. Whether you've got the classes that can easily cope with those mechanics, or whether you've just got the people, because a lot of players, particularly raiders, like to look at their damage meters, and that doesn't help you do the mechanics. So sometimes you're just waiting for people, enough people to focus on the mechanics and not their damage meters. But, you know, it's sometimes a vain hope. Seems ironic having to raid to get gear to progress Mythic Plus. I think from Blizzard's point of view, they would probably say, although, you know, this would fall on deaf ears with a lot of players, that they want people who want to do all aspects of the game, because they want us playing it all the time, which is why they tie so many different systems together. So they want us to raid and do Mythic Plus, and I suppose in BfA do Warfronts and Islands as well. The problem will be, and although they haven't said anything definitely about this, I hope they are at least sensitive to it. If you encourage us to do too much, you create a situation where people will stop playing the game altogether because it's too much. Particularly if people are competitive. If people can't compete at the level they would, or play at the level they would like to, because they can't put in the amount of time needed to do so, then they will just stop and they'll go and do something else. It's 150k for a plus 15. Wow. That doesn't even go 4 ways very nicely, does it? Yeah, I haven't done any boosting for gold, really, in Legion. Which specs am I liking on Alpha so far? Well, I haven't disliked any intensely, although I always have a sneaking suspicion I'm never going to get on with Warlocks. I just never seem to. I mean, the Monk, Windwalker Monk seems nice. I haven't played any of the other Monk specs, so I'd quite like to try Mistweaver. But Windwalker seems nice. And Beastmaster Hunter, but Marksman, I'm not so sure. I should have tried a dungeon as Marksman. I didn't get on with it solo, doing solo stuff, but then that's because with a Hunter, Beastmaster's always better than Marksman for solo stuff anyway. Because it's a pain in the arse when you have to keep avoiding your enemy, as opposed to when you've got a pet to grab aggro off it. In the end, I had to stop using Lone Pet, but even then, the pet's just not as effective. You know, I've quite liked Blood DK. I did do a dungeon as a Blood DK. I traditionally do like Blood DKs because they can be quite reactive. Like, I'm not a natural tanky person, so I can get myself into situations and as a Blood DK, usually deal with it because I can react and go, oh shit, I made a right mess of it. And you've got stuff to deal with it. You've got individual grips, you've got AoE grips, you've got really good cooldowns to save your ass. You know, so yeah, Blood DK I'm quite liking as well. I quite liked the Arms Warrior as well. I don't know how much has changed on the Arms Warrior. You've accidentally been playing on Oceanic. Oh, I've quite liked Havoc Demon Hunter as well. I only played that for one session, but that was quite nice. They've changed the talents around quite a bit. That's a bit more interesting. You've accidentally been playing on Oceanic Realm instead of one in the US. Is there any reason to switch to one in the US? I have no idea. Other than raid times, I suppose. Like, it depends. If the raid times of the guild you're in suit you, then if it's raiding, you do. Otherwise, I don't think it really matters, does it? What's my prediction? What were the sub numbers in the lifespan of Legion start to finish? No point in making a prediction like that because we'll never know the answer. It wouldn't surprise me if they've maintained round about 5 million. But there's no way of finding out. So it's just pure guesswork. There are things we can do to estimate it, though, without just making it up completely. But there's always going to be a certain amount of doubt over it. You know, I think you can safely say there's at least 4 million playing it. But I reckon they'll have maintained about 5 million. Because it's been quite, I think, successful. With Azerite armor replacing tier, you think Mythic Plus will be pretty self-sustaining if you absolutely don't want to raid? I think it can be now. I mean, you've got to bear in mind the best Azerite armor is still going to come from raids. So, but whether you can get the pieces you want from heroic raids, and there's not enough of a benefit from getting the mythic versions, and therefore you don't have to bother with that, well, you know, that's possible. If they do that, though, then Blizzard have basically arsed it up. Because that's not their intent. Their intent is to incentivize, for PvE purposes, for group PvE, mythic raiding. You're excited for the potential of war mode. They're going to do loot drop style events in certain zones. Did they say that? I thought someone was suggesting that. I didn't know if they'd actually said they were doing that. But it is a good idea. Even if it isn't exactly a loot drop, they said they are actively looking at that sort of thing and how they can... Oh, interesting. They can work it in. Yeah, that sort of thing. I mean, like I was saying, someone was saying this on the stream either yesterday or the day before. And Elder Scrolls Online has a similar thing for just PvE. With the anchors, you just hear the anchor sound, and you know in that zone there's an anchor. You go over to where the anchor is, and you know there's going to be a load of players there. And there it's a PvE thing. It's a cooperative thing. But, you know, having a similar thing for PvP. It's a bit like, if people remember from Vanilla, the arena in Stranglethorn Vale, that sort of thing. So, you know, when the chest would appear for that, as it was about to appear, you'd start to get people gathering around it. And then when it did, you'd get people going there to become the arena master. So it would certainly get people to congregate. It would be an excellent idea for that. They said gear at the end of dungeons won't scale based on the key. They said gear at the end of dungeons won't scale based on key. What the hell's the use of the key then? Hang on, I must be misunderstanding you there. I didn't see that in the Sloot Bag interview though, but I can't promise I haven't forgotten something. I would have remembered something like that. What's the purpose of a key then? Or the level of a key? Because you can't get your Azerite armour Warforged. Well, certainly not Titanforging. I don't know whether they've definitely said it can't Warforge. I'm not sure about that. I think that was implied. It certainly can't Titanforge. I'm not sure about Warforged sockets with the Azerite armour. But it won't scale based on the key? No. I'm sure they said, I saw a developer say, that they were happy with the item level in Mythic Plus. That I must be misunderstanding you. Hold on. Preach mathed it out. Behave. Sorry, just flicking through the chat on Oceanic versus US realms. You can all help each other out on that one. Oceanic will mean Australia, New Zealand area, yes. Gurabashi indeed was the arena in... and you could fight anyone, so you could... Yeah, oh yeah. It was a complete free... I was on a PvE realm in Vanilla, and anyone in that realm that wasn't in your group was... I think you could group up and be friendly with people. But certainly you went in and everyone was hostile, including the gnomes. Hi, Echoes. There'll probably be a requirement to push mythic raiding, to push keys with the efficiency of high-level gearing, compared to rely... Yeah, you can't rely on... Or apparently you won't be able to rely on Thunderforged as... Not Thunderforged, Titanforged, sorry. Thunderforged, what it used to be called. The original Warforged. Titanforged, sorry. Because it's supposed to have a lower drop rate. But at the same time, I don't know how much that is. I don't think they've quantified it. You know, there's the rate at which Titanforge drops now, I don't, are they halving the rate at which it drops? If they're not, at least they're decimating it. I don't know. I mean, it could well be that it's still worth doing lots of Mythic Plus for Titan Forge. It must scale because they've said that they're happy with the item level in the kit, and it makes no difference. Why have levels of keys if it didn't? It has to. Oh, the allied races, yes. So Dark Iron and Magar Orcs will be available at release, and Zandalari Trolls and Kulturan Humans available at some unspecified point later on. Whether that's 8.1 or not, I don't know. But there's been enough stuff in the files, you would think it's not intended to be a long way into the future. I would think something like 8.1 would be when we get the trolls and the humans. I really don't think... I know they refuse to say no, but they can't do Vulpera as an allied race. At first I was looking at it and thinking Vulpera as an allied race and then Tortollan as well. The problem is that Tortollan are friendly as a faction to both Horde and Alliance. So it wouldn't work for them. Unless they pulled another Pandaren. Oh yeah, so okay. So above the plus 15, you can't get any higher. Yes, Blizzard did say that. I did see that one. But presumably, just like in Legion, you'd get access to more pieces of gear if you pushed above plus 15. And no, we don't have any idea on how they're going to tune the Thunder Force drop. Keep saying Thunder Force, Titan Force drops. That's the issue. It may be that although they reduce the chance of it dropping, it's not by that much. In which case, I think the system needs rewards equal to key level. Can't have the same reward for a plus 15 as a plus 22. Yeah, but, well, the idea is with a plus 22, you get more bits. So you're more likely to get a piece of loot. And also, the major rewards for a plus 22 is the kudos of having done a plus 22. Remember, they did say, although they're not saying this is definite, they did say they've been considering doing achievements like season-based achievements for Mythic Plus dungeons, like a sort of ahead of the curve, cutting edge type achievements. So if you get a plus 15 done in that thing, you get a particular achievement, and then in the next season, so to speak, next tier, there's another one to get. So they've talked about doing those raid-style achievements for Mythic Plus dungeons, as opposed to just getting the plus 15 achievement at any point during the expansion. I don't think there's going to be Magar Palace. I don't think orcs really are ever going to become humans. Vulpera, if it were an allied race, of course, would be a Horde allied race, I grant you. I don't think they will, though. Not just because they're too cute. You can be too cute. But they're also feeble. If you've done... I mean, the background I've got here is the zone where you do a lot of questing with them. And they are so weak and feeble that they would not make it in the Horde. There's no way the Horde would accept them. I never even got a sense of why I'm even helping them. They're pathetic. They're the World of Warcraft equivalent of the dodo. They should just be allowed to die out. Didn't they say something about those walrus things? What, from Wrath? I don't remember them saying anything about that. Lightforged and Nightborn were mostly neutral as well. This is true. Yes, you're right. But the issue is that we got access to Nightborn and Lightforged as allied races after the Legion storyline. In Battle for Azeroth, unless they did the same thing and brought them out as allied races when Battle for Azeroth is effectively over, you have a situation where you could have where Tortolan, for example, are allies, but as a Horde player, you're going up to them and earning rep with their faction. So, you know, I don't know. So you can't rule it out in the long term, but during the BfA cycle, content cycle, it would make very little sense. And also bear in mind, the only people that can play Nightborn and Lightforged Draenei now are the ones who pre-ordered it anyway. So it's intended to be a post-Legion thing. You still want Tuskar for Alliance. Can you imagine some of the animations for them though? And what the armor would look like? I mean, I think just some of them are just not really suitable. Maybe Blizzard is trying to give the Horde their own worthless race. Yeah, but they're feeble, even by gnome standards. The Vulpera are feeble. Are all the zones in the alpha now? Yes, or at least all the zones we know about. Just like in Legion, it wouldn't surprise me if there are other zones going to open up at certain points. But in terms of the leveling zones, yeah, they're all open now. Not necessarily complete, but they are at least all open. Asmongold hates the furry agenda. I'll bet he does. Oh dear. But I can't see Vulperas being an allied race. They just don't make any sense at all. They are too cute. They're too cute and worthless. I cannot emphasize the worthless aspect of them. I cannot understand why, as a Horde player, it's a complete abandonment of the immersion as a Horde player. Like, the only way I got through that zone was because I'm a paladin, and maybe I thought to myself, a paladin should really just be helping out the weak. That makes sense as a paladin. But if I went to do that zone, Volden I think it's called, I've forgotten now, something like that, as, say, a hardened orc warrior, I would have major difficulties with those quests. I'd be thinking to myself, why am I helping these people? Are they going to take away the rep quest requirements for the current 4 allied races after launch? No. They said they might adapt them, but they're not taking them away. Is War Mode available in the alpha? Not at the moment. Not unless a new build goes out. I mean, they've brought out a new build every week, but it's not always been the same day every week, so I don't know exactly when we're going to be getting it. But at the moment, there's almost nothing in the alpha. There's the zones. There's a lot of the quests. There's the classes and specs, although not all complete. I was having a little go on Warlock this week. And on the Affliction Warlock, there's a talent missing, a coming soon on the talents. So you can't even say that all classes and specs are, even though we know that none of them are complete. But it's not even pretend complete at the moment. You know, islands are in for testing, that's fair enough. Dungeons, fewer than half the dungeons are available. So little in the alpha. There's so little in the alpha. And to say we're 4 months away from it coming out. All I can imagine is it must be ready. They just haven't put it in the alpha yet. They must have some reason for doing that. Because they said that beta will be dropping in the next few weeks. And that when it does drop, it will be feature complete. In other words, everything will be in it. So they must be about to drop a crap load of content into it and call it beta. What we've got? Some Pandaren bashing here. What's going on? Why does everyone hate the pandas? Yeah, I don't get that. And so someone says there, because it seemed like they were piggybacking off Kung Fu Panda. There was no seeming about it at all. They absolutely were. They absolutely were. The whole art style of the Pandaria zone was based upon the art style of Kung Fu Panda. Obviously, the male panda, you know, that was done before Kung Fu Panda because Chen Storm started in Warcraft 3. So, and that's how they got away with it, I think. I think that's how they got away without copyright issues, because they could just point to Warcraft 3, you know, and that was a monk. Yeah, so, but yeah, I think, but I loved Mr. Pandaren. I love the Pandaren, and I love the Pandaren monks. So, you know. It's not a case of they were in Warcraft 3. Chen Stormstart was in Warcraft 3. He was the only Pandaren in it, as far as I remember. Will I test out War Mode? Yeah, sure. Of course I will. I want to know how it works. You first got the game when MOP was the most recent expansion. So you may be a bit roasted towards Panda. You actually don't mind that. I liked MOP. MOP, I think, on balance, was probably my favourite expansion. Oh yeah, their internal build will absolutely be months ahead. They will have an internal build where all of this stuff is in a usable format for internal testing. What I don't understand is how so little of it is in for external testing. I don't understand, for example, why they brought out that one piece of Azerite armour. Because it was your most bog standard piece of Azerite armour. Obviously, it was going to get a bad press. Obviously, a lot of people were going to be scathing about it. Why didn't they just release a lot more of it? I don't get it. They must have it. They must have it ready, even if it needs tweaking. You know, the fact that they didn't means that they were always... And you can imagine what it's like at Blizz HQ. They release it thinking, oh, everyone will be really... They've been really waiting for Azerite armour. Let's release a piece. They'll be really excited about it. We'll get a load of good press out of it. Then they see everyone complaining about it and going, oh, what the bloody hell? Why are they complaining about it? That's the most basic form. Don't they know that the stuff you get from elsewhere is going to be loads better? No, they don't, because you haven't shown them it. Oh, dear. Hotfixes out, still no 80 BT nerf. I assume you mean on Taurus Burning Throne. Let us have a look. Have they announced hotfixes? Well, you just said they are, so I assume they have. Oh yeah, look at this. Ah, well, you see, I don't think Ian Hazakostas' guild has killed Argus yet. People keep saying, I think they might. I think they may only be half joking that there won't be any nerfs coming till his guild's killed it, because they want to do it relatively unnerved. You always thought it was because the client in Asia was coming out alongside MOP. I did think, interestingly enough, that Mr. Pandaren was probably more of a nod towards the Asian market in terms of why they were doing it. But nonetheless, the style of it was clearly heavily inspired, if not downright copied, from Kung Fu Panda. We can only be thankful they didn't have a ninja tortoise in it. Your 8th legendary on your Horde pally with 1 day, 20 hours played at 110. You think Ian is trying to hold his cards close with as much content as he can? He seems like a sneaky one. Well, I'm quite sure he is a sneaky one because he has a background in law. However, I don't see why they're trying to hold that many cards close to their chest. I don't think it's a case of that. I think it's because there's nothing written on those cards. Like, there was quite a lot of developers at PAX, it seems to me, when they were asked direct questions about things like Azerite and the islands, and in terms of how it's intended to be used, the answers that were coming back were, we're still discussing it. How you can still be discussing what you want from the Azerite system at this stage of the development cycle, I do not know. Hi Pinky, I'm well, thank you. So let's have a look. Okay, so in terms of hotfixes, druids. Oh, there's nothing interesting. Oh, intros. Yes. Okay. Yes, we have come now to a natural law. So so what I've been trying to do, there's several things I'm trying to do in terms of slight design changes on the channel. Bear in mind, I'm a complete ignorant, You know, I have no skill with these things. So the one you may have seen already for upcoming content, I'm trying to do different intros for different content, so it's to try and make me focus on doing a quick intro to tell people what the video's about, and then it sort of goes into something like, I'm just going to move this out of the way, which you can't even see. So that was the one that was visible on the video I did today. If it was a general news thing, then it could potentially look like this. None of these are final. Especially as if I use After Effects, I might be able to do something a bit better with them. And then one's for Ret Paladin related videos. So what I've used for video editing is Adobe Premiere Elements. But I have subscribed, because apparently you can do that instead of having to buy the thing, to Adobe After Effects, which is which I became aware of last year as a stunning piece of software, which unfortunately when I was looking it up last year cost £1,000 and required a lot of skill to use, or a lot of knowledge to use at least. It's not user friendly. But it's now available on the Adobe Cloud thing as a subscription model, which is ideal. I still have to learn how to use it, but I'm going to try and learn something, at least 3D text, this week. I can't ever go to BlizzCon, I'm afraid. Apart from, I don't really like travel in general, and I don't have a passport, but I could, you know, overcome that in theory. But what completely scuppers me is that I'm a teacher. And BlizzCon, even though, yes, they've announced the dates again, is always, you know, I can never get to it, basically. Even if, because sometimes BlizzCon is, I've forgotten what date it is this year, actually. When is it again? Occasionally, it is round about the time of half term. But the problem is, half term is like a week. And so you'd end up with a situation where either I wouldn't be able to get there in time, or if it was at the end of the holiday, I wouldn't be able to get back in time. And I can't even remember what the holiday dates are. So I can never make it anyway. Yeah, I had a look at Pinnacle, and what I was getting from it, I've not abandoned the concept altogether. I'm going to try After Effects first. I know that After Effects can do more than Pinnacle. It can do more than most things, because, you know, Pinnacle is, from what I can tell, a bit more user-friendly. But if it can't do if I can learn how to use some of the things that After Effects that I want to do, and hopefully, I mean, that's the beauty of YouTube, of course. All I need to do is ideally find, if I can find one channel where someone efficiently shows you how to do things. The problem is when I look up tutorials on how to do things in certain programs, some of them, and I'm probably guilty of doing this myself in my own, fanny about a bit too much, and they don't get straight to the point, and they don't show you the steps to take. So it's a case of ideally finding a single channel where they go through this professionally, straight to the point, tell you what you need to know, so that you can, you know, use it immediately, instead of having to wait 20 minutes where there's like 3 minutes worth of actual content. But at the moment, I'll just have to do, like, scan around for it. Is the virtual ticket a good deal? Yes, it is. Oh yeah, I always get the virtual ticket ever since it's been available, because you get the mounts. I mean, if you think about it, just from the mounts, but I'm not saying it's worth it just for the mounts. It's not. But for when you consider the mounts you get, that's okay. And you get, hang on, it sometimes gets a pet. It's a pet or mounts, isn't it? Anyway, hi Slayer, and the fact that you get to watch it there and then. So what we did last BlizzCon, for example, is I basically I didn't stream the event, of course, because that would be naughty. Can't do that. But I was watching it and not broadcasting it, but I was streaming my thoughts on it at the same time with a bottle of Californian Red by me. So that was quite good. We had quite a lot of people actually joining in on that. But no, unfortunately, BlizzCon is not somewhere I can ever really go. Even when there's ones closer to home, they're never at a time. And I'm not a traveller anyway. But if I had to, if I was able to, I'd probably make it for BlizzCon. But yeah, it's not at the right time. If they did it in the middle of summer, it would be a different matter. Yeah, the maps, because we had two maps. We had an Alliance and a Horde one. They were both pretty good, actually. Doesn't Adobe do specific video tutorials in your package? It probably does, but they're not. Sometimes when you get the ones produced by the company, they're usually a bit crap. Much better to have someone who struggled through it themselves, because you ideally want someone who not only can tell you what buttons to press, but in such a way that you avoid some of the pitfalls that may come from it, or show you little things that they have, because it's always better if you struggle. You're always a better teacher of something if you've struggled through it yourself. What am I drinking today? This is peach. I've still got plenty of Vimto, don't worry. I've not run out, but I'm on peach squash today. Peach, fruit and barley. There's a lot of BlizzCon content never put on YouTube. This is true, but most of it most of the good stuff anyway finds its way there anyway. The other benefit is if you're at BlizzCon, you've got to physically shuffle yourself to where you want to be. Whereas here, I will just click, click. Oh, I want to go there. Now I want to go there. Now I want to go there. So yeah. I mean, the only thing I think in recent years that I missed by not physically being there was when they were showing some exclusive footage from the Warcraft movie. But even that got leaked online anyway, in a crap quality, but still. So yeah. Did we actually get a pet as well? Oh, I also missed the odor as well. Is it that bad? Are people packed in that tight? Because I have been to conventions before. Because I used to go to what was it called? Gamescom for Warhammer stuff. That was all right. I actually used to enjoy that. People were fairly packed into the NEC in Birmingham there, but. Or was it the NIA? I can't remember. One of the convention halls in Birmingham, and that was all right. Does it smell at BlizzCon of the? Because surely they've got air conditioning in it. It's California, for goodness sake. Did I like the movie? I did like the movie. You know, it's quite sad. I keep seeing. Obviously, every time someone tweets Duncan Jones, I follow Duncan Jones on both my Twitters, and. Every time someone says something nice about the film, he retweets it, of course. So you can tell he's got a lot of love for it himself. And every time I see a comment where someone's asking what the prospect is for a sequel, it's quite heartbreaking, really, because there isn't going to be one, because it made a loss. So it's sad, really. It would have been cool. I would have led with the Arthas movie. I'd have done that. You know, because the approach I would have taken would not be start at the beginning. The approach I would have taken would be start at the most spectacular storyline, and if necessary, because prequels are a thing. Everyone does prequels. That's a fairly standard thing. You could always do that, but start off with the thing that's going to have the biggest wow factor. You blame Metzen for the loss. What is bad acting? I don't think we can blame him. I don't think he even made it. Did he? He didn't even make it into the final cut, did he? It was like one of the extras selling perfume. I don't think it was his fault. You think it would do better as an HBO series? I would be cool with the idea of an animated series, yeah. A bit like, you know, the Star Wars stuff they did. You know, the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. That sort of thing with a Warcraft storyline. Yeah, I could get on board with that. Have I ever considered a guild of my own? No. I wouldn't want to be a guild master. I don't want to deal with all the admin crap. Like, whenever I've been an officer in the guild, you know, there's certain roles I've been okay with. I've been a guild, I've been a raid leader, I've been a recruitment officer. But there's no way I would want to be a GM with all the horse shit that goes with it. You should have think they should have done a Marvel style film. One hero. One criticism certainly was the sheer number of characters in it. But again, if they did the Arthur story, there's fewer characters in that. As well. And I think it suffered from the orc thing. Because I saw quite a lot of reviews, particularly from North America. Because I looked up a lot of reviews from North America, which is, of course, where it did particularly badly. And a big criticism seemed to be the aspect of Lord of the Rings knockoff because of orcs. Now, you've got to bear in mind, as people who play role-playing games, fantasy role-playing games, everyone knows that, you know, of course, Lord of the Rings has influenced every single fantasy genre since. It directly influenced Dungeons and Dragons. It directly influenced, like, Warhammer, and therefore... And the reason is because when you come up with a gaming system, it takes a long time to come up with a good gaming system. So Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, Warcraft itself, they don't have time while they're doing that to come up with an entire mythology, world, races, all the stuff of it. So they basically get something familiar that people are familiar with. And obviously what all fantasy role-playing gamers are familiar with is Tolkien's world. So of course, yeah, so in Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer, Warcraft, all these things, you know, Elder Scrolls, you have orcs in it. Of course you do. But, you know, the normal movie-going public doesn't see that. They just see it as a rip-off of someone's work, which in theory it is. And they couldn't get past that. So they should have done the Arthur story, because that has more original. Even though the themes in it, you can draw parallels with. You can, you know, Lord of the Rings covers virtually every fantasy trope anyway, but it would have got over that. I think it would have got over it. I think it would have appealed to more people. And with doing the Arthur story, they could have steered clear of orcs completely. Even though, you know, obviously we know that they'd have still had to change it a little bit, because they'd have to remove, obviously, like we know, the reason why Tyrannus didn't respond quickly enough to the plague was because he saw the orcs as the biggest threat. That would have to be removed. That element would have to be removed. You'd also probably have to remove Medivh, or be very cunning about it. But, I mean, they did enough changes in the Warcraft movie anyway to accommodate certain things. Oh, the thing that makes it difficult, I think, for a new player to follow the lore in the game is not because there's so much of it. It's because they bloody well, they don't stay true to it. So you've got all these novels that have been written, half of which are no longer relevant anymore. You could start reading all the Warcraft novels in order, and then be told 10 novels in, oh yeah, all that stuff you've read, you might as well chuck it in the bin because it's trash, because it's all been superseded. You know. I haven't even properly read my I've got my Warcraft 3 Chronicles now. I could have done with getting it last week when I had more time, because there's things I want to read now for the rest of this holiday. There's a book I've got which is not a fiction book, which I'm wanting to read. and the stuff on After Effects that I want to read. But I'm also going to read Warcraft, the Chronicles 3 this week as well. But it's going to take me longer because there's other stuff I've got on my reading list. Would have been seen as a Game of Thrones copy because of the Frozen King and Undead. I don't think it would, because it predates. I don't know when the books for when were the books written for Game of Thrones? It predates the TV series at least. By a long way. But I mean, for me, Echoes, you know, you say you like the cinematics they create for the expansions and wish they'd do a movie series like that with Netflix. I would, again, that could still be quite a high budget. You've got to bear in mind, trailers for games have a massive budget, massive. So to do a whole series based on that would be excessively expensive. The first book was in the 90s, was it? So, when did the Frozen Throne come up? Because that would be the 90s as well, wouldn't it? Late 90s? Maybe around about the same time. Which came first, though? Would still ride the hype train? Because I don't know. Because do people even consider Game of Thrones to be all that original? I mean, I haven't seen Game of Thrones. But from what I gather, it's set in a traditional medieval type fantasy setting and involves dragons. It's not terribly original, is it? So it may slightly predate the Frozen Throne then. Let's have a look. I think Frozen Throne may have been just after then. Let's have a look. Oh! By a long time. That wasn't in the 90s. It says here 2003. Okay. Much closer to the WoW release than I thought it was. There we go. I haven't, no. Like, I think the only fantasy setting that can be really considered original, that doesn't really draw on Tolkien any real way, would probably draw on Conan. So I would think, from what I've seen of Game of Thrones, which is not a lot, I would say, if anything, it seems to draw more on Conan the Barbarian. You know, it's not dissimilar in terms of the you know, basic premise. People like good fantasy stories, characters, violence and sex. Well, apparently. What did I grow up on? I grew up on quite a few different ones. A lot of Doctor Who books. I used to read the novels before you could get videos on the older series. Chronicles of Narnia, Tolkien. A lot of random fantasy books where it was just like, you know, one-offs for certain authors. The Vikings. That's wasn't that the game that Blizzard, possibly before they were called Blizzard, did before Warcraft? I don't think Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn count as fantasy now. It's fiction. It's not really fantasy. It's the sort of thing that could have happened. It didn't, but it could have done. I don't think whitewashing gates is a particularly strong fantasy theme. But although it was a long time before I read Huckleberry Finn, or the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, I think is what they're actually called. I can't remember. There was a television series I used to watch as a kid. Also Zorro, but I don't think that counts as fantasy either. What about Merlin? Well, Merlin, lots of Merlin stuff wasn't there when I was a kid. But I did watch the Excalibur film as a kid. That had a strong impression on me. I have that on DVD. I still watch that now and then. That's still the best King Arthur film I've ever seen. Every time someone says they're doing another film of it, I always get quite excited because a more modern production of it should be quite good. But then everyone seems to want to do their own weird thing with it, and it just ends up being crap. Big question: do we know if only demon hunters will be able to wear the glaives? I would think so, because it is its own weapon type. I haven't seen anything in the alpha yet, because warglaives, oddly enough, I seem to get them dropping on basically every character, like just green drops from trash, like when I'm out and about doing solo questing, and they're red for everything apart from demon hunters that I've seen so far. So it is its own weapon type, and as far as I can tell, demon hunters are the only ones that can wear them. Or use them, whatever you want to think of it. I didn't like the Guy Ritchie King Arthur film. No. It was dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. All of these films where they try to put their own weird... I didn't even like... Even though it was sort of a good film if you took the... There was that King Arthur one where it was based on like a Roman centurion or something. That was a reasonable film. It was watchable. But as a link to a King Arthur type thing, it was complete horseshit. And even though I know that there is this theory that the real King Arthur may have actually been a Roman soldier, it did nothing for me, that film. If it had just been done as the film and no link to King Arthur or anything like that, if it had just been done as a film as it was, I'd have gone, yeah, that's okay. Because the actual film itself was okay. But it had no link whatsoever with the mythology of Arthur. Priests get to use swords in BfA, do they? I had not noticed. There did used to be casters. Well, there's for mages, paladins, warlocks. I think can use them as well, can't they? But druids can't. Priests can't. I imagine it's still the same. Your favourite Arthur film is Sword in the Stone. I wasn't even that keen on that when I was a kid. You're referencing the BfA trailer. Oh, yeah, with Anduin. Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure that priests cannot use swords. One of my favourite Arthur-inspired poems is Sir Galahad. Goes on for quite a while, but that's got quite a few quotable things from it. The most famous lines from which I think are, my good blade carves the casques of men, my tough lance thrusteth sure. My strength is as the strength of 10, because my heart is pure. But there's a lot, there's a lot of poetry that comes from it. I mean, originally, the story itself is French, of course, originally, or was at least written in French. Sword in the Stone has been made into live action. What, so we're going to have real squirrels running around, are we? Nibbling their nuts. Can do without that. They should just go back to basics, look at Excalibur and do a more modern production of that. That's more than you could ask for. That's got everything in it that you want. Maybe they just think that there's no point because it was perfect the way it was. I don't know. With a younger Patrick Stewart, who was still bald then as well. I don't think that guy ever had hair. Oh, now, yes. The Monty Python and the Holy Grail was probably the second best King Arthur film, yes. I'd probably agree with that one. Patrick Stewart was born at the age of 55. I think you may be right. Because, let's see. Because, I mean, that film was made in the 70s, I think, wasn't it? So, let me try and find out. Oh, 1981. Is that right? Hold on, let me just check this is the right one. Yeah, it is. 1981, okay, fine. But, you know, it didn't look a lot different back then to it does now. I should watch that again this week sometime. Did I watch the Star Wars Solo trailer? Yes, I did. And it was a very good trailer in that it convinced me not to watch the film. Not that I was planning on watching the film. I might, at a push, watch the Kenobi film. But if I'm honest, I'll probably wait for it to come out on DVD. I'm not really that bothered about going to the cinema to see it unless it happens to come out at a time when I'm, you know, it's like a holiday or something. I'm not going to go and spend precious time at a weekend watching it. I'm not keen generally on spin-off stuff. You know, very little spin-off stuff ends up being worthwhile. You started raiding Elite and only heroic but want to become Mythic next expansion. All guilds I signed up to said I needed more experience. How'd you get more experience? They won't. You can get into one. You get experience by joining one that needs players at the moment. You'll just have to go to one that's not necessarily that great, that's doing some Mythic bosses. There must be some, unless you're only looking on your own realm, maybe, in which case I don't know. It depends on the realm. People will take ones with only heroic experience if they, but they just won't favour them. It's like different. There's different selling points for you as an applicant. One of them is experience. You know, so they will generally want to go for experience if they can, but in a situation where they can't, then there will be openings. You just have to wait for them and be patient. Why will I watch the Yoda film? I didn't even know. Did I know there was a Yoda film? No, I didn't even know there was a Yoda film. It doesn't surprise me because Disney, now that they've bought the rights to Star Wars, want to do a film on every single character. You know, Jesus Christ, what's the Chewbacca one going to be like? Probably Chewbacca as a little cub or whatever they call little Wookiees, getting into mischief with his friends. We'll just have a whole film just of, you know, inexplicable growling. And leaving stink bombs on Mr. Wilson's porch. Looking for a normal guild on EU Silvermoon. Well, Silvermoon should have plenty of guilds. But, you know, I can't be doing that. I wish they... Well, actually, I don't know. Do I? I sort of wish that they would do some films based on the wider Star Wars universe, in particular Old Republic days, when there was a lot more scope. However, that being said, although what's more true to say is I would like to see films based on that, what I wouldn't like to see is stories ruined by giving the film to an idiot who again wants to do their own thing. I don't like these filmmakers who insist on putting their own mark on it. You know, I just want them to make a good film based on the source material. There should be lots of guilds on Twisted Nether and Terran Mill, yes. If you're a Horde player. You wish Blizzard would work on the Guild Finder. Well, so do I. I mean, WoW Progress at the moment is your best bet, but it's not perfect. An in-game version would be much better, I agree. They should do a Jabba the Hutt origin film. I mean, there were not so much an origin film. There was more about Jabba the Hutt, of course, in Clone Wars, wasn't there? Generally not a fan of prequels. You already know what happens. It does, yeah, it does kill a lot of the tension, I have to admit, yeah. Because, I mean, that's the thing. Someone was saying recently, someone on here, we were talking about it a while ago now, that they've got a kid and they need to get them to watch the Star Wars films. And what do? Do they got them to watch, like, episode 1 first and through? Or not? And I said, no, you don't do that. Because then you lose all the drama of The Empire Strikes Back when Vader tells Luke he's his father. Because if you watch 1, 2 and 3 first, you know that. And I'll tell you another thing. If you watch 1, 2 and 3 first, you're going to become extremely uncomfortable when you see Leia kiss Luke. You know, you need to watch 4, 5, 6 first, then 1, 2, 3 if you must. And you know, and then 7. You have to do it in the order that they were published and produced. Movies based on real-life tragedies bother you? Well, I've never actually watched the Titanic film. I can't be doing with it. I know that I'm going to... Because the only thing worthwhile in the whole film will be the sinking ship, and I know the ship's going to sink. I don't give a shit about the romance story. Lincoln I haven't seen, but I might quite like to watch it. I'm not opposed to watching it. But I generally don't watch films if they're supposed to be based on true events, because they never are. They're always lies. And the fact that they claim to be that is misrepresenting the facts. It's a bit like, do you know what? The best film I've personally got... I've got a few films based on... Because for all I say that I don't like it based on true events, like there are some films I have based on true events, my favourite of which is Mississippi Burning, but that's a pack of lies. There's The Untouchables, which is also a pack of lies. But there is one that's fairly true to form, and that is Invictus, which is a film about the Rugby World Cup in South Africa, which South Africa won. And it's a superb film. And what baffled me is it was produced and directed by an American, Clint Eastwood, who I thought wouldn't actually appreciate, you know, a lot of the themes in it. But he did a really good job. However, there are 2 very Hollywoody bits in it, which had no basis in fact, and were not necessary for the film. One of which is when a plane flies very low over the stadium, everyone thinks it's a terrorist attack, and it just turns out someone's painted on the undercarriage you know, a supporting message for the local team. Which is horseshit. Why would you do that? You know, but Hollywood, they can't help themselves. And the other one is, although the end match is sort of true, they cut it in a different order, and you get a totally wrong impression about the match itself as a result of it. But other than that, it's actually a really good film. Apollo 13 is pretty good, yes. But again, how accurate it is, I don't know. It was supposed to be fairly true to form. But most of these films, they always have to do something weird because they don't think that the public would be interested enough in the truth. You know, if the story itself is not interesting enough, then don't make a film of it. Do I like horses? Not especially, no. Why? Because I'm British. What's horses got to do with Britain? Goodfellas, but again, Goodfellas is based on a true... But the actual narrative of the film isn't true. It's based on true events, but when you watch documentaries of the actual fact, a lot... You know, the film bears very little relation to the events in the film. My favourite film, probably out of the true to event ones, is probably Mississippi Burning. Even though that is also not exactly true to form either. But it's a very good film. Forrest Gump. I have only watched that a couple of times, actually. You know, the first time I watched it, I thought it was quite good. It's one of those films, though, when I watched it a second time, wasn't as good. You know, when you know what's going to happen... Some films, when you know what's going to happen, just for me, don't seem to be as good. Shawshank Redemption is another classic case of a film that was really good the first time I watched it and not so good the second time. I was bored with it the second time I watched it. So sometimes what's interesting about it is the story. And once you know the story, actually the rest of it is not so interesting. Back to the Future is very watchable again. You know, I can rewatch that a lot of times. I don't think it's based on true events, though. Every time your guild wipes on Argus, your roommates narrates the wipe like is Morgan Freeman in the movie. That might be worth putting together as a blooper reel then at the end. I miss being able to do... I'm only able to do a proper blooper reel one tier. I never get enough footage. And actually at the moment I can't get enough footage because I can't even record my the people in the raid. Because I daren't let them out onto Twitch. Dare not stream my Discord when I'm raiding. Which means I can't record it. You used to have Bill Cosby and Christopher Walken impersonators. I suppose the Bill Cosby impersonator doesn't get much work these days. You hope they don't make a Fortnite movie. Early talks with movie studios. The thing is, though, they keep having this albatross round the neck of studios trying to do what they call films based on games because they never seem to do very well. Like even Warcraft, which is probably, I would guess, one of the biggest budget versions of it, has made a loss, you know. And you've had some spectacular flops like the Mario Brothers film, although that was just a complete shambles from start to finish. Although it did have a nice soundtrack by Roxette. I quite liked that. It was worth it for that, at least. You want more Alien and Predator movies? I don't know. I'm not keen on when they sort of combine different things together like that. I don't think... I've never really enjoyed them. Mind you, I didn't really enjoy... Like, the first Predator film I thought was quite good. I never really enjoyed the others anyway. So I think it's just to do with... I think it's just the Predator thing I don't like. Whereas the Alien films, that were all sort of watchable. Movies about games rarely do well because they're rushed. It is possible. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing about it. Because, I mean, especially the modern game has such a strong narrative these days anyway, that there should be no reason why you can't make an effective game from it. But, yeah, it just... I mean, even Warcraft, which I thought was a good film, I also thought the Doom film was quite good as well. I thought that was pretty good. But even though it seemed to have very little in common with the actual Doom game, but nonetheless they just don't do well, do they? Whereas if you base a film on a comic book, it almost always makes money. Madness. I don't know what the thing is with that. You're excited for the Lord of the Rings series on Amazon. Well, I shall wait for that one and see. I might be. I'll just wait to see what it's like. You thought Warcraft was awful. Well, there were a lot of other people that did as well, but I thought it was good. What do I think of BfA PvE? Will it be better than Legion PvE? God, I hope so. I do hope so. Legion PvE was too needy. It's far too needy. Instead of just being what it was and say, right, do you want to do Mythic Plus? Yeah, okay, we'll do Mythic Plus. Or do you want to do Mythic Plus? Not really. No, do Mythic Plus. We're going to put all these shinies there to make you do Mythic Plus. No. Let me do what I want to do. Doom with the Rock. Yes, Doom with the Rock. I quite liked it. No, exactly. Well, that's my issue with it. We don't see any of the actual demons. It's all just, you know... There was that... The only nod to the game at all was the scene where it does it from the character point of view with the chainsaw. And there's, you know... But the film itself was, you know... I watched it... I didn't watch it at the cinema or anything. I watched it on late night TV. And it was perfect for that. Late night, I've come home from the pub, late night TV, watched that with a kebab. You know, it was perfect for that sort of thing. We don't know that anything kept subs coming in. We don't know what the sub situation is with Warcraft. I would suspect it stayed about the same. But the way they keep subs the same or increase them or whatever is by just making sure that we want to play enough every month to be worth the £8 or £9 or whatever per month you're paying for it. As long as they do that, that's all they have to do. They don't need to make us play 5 hours a day. There's no need for that. No, I don't shout when I'm drunk. I'm not a shouty drunk. So it's all fun. I don't actually get drunk anymore these days anyway. But even when I did, I wasn't a shouty drunk. I was a very talkative drunk. I would sometimes bore people's tits off. But, you know, I didn't shout or anything. Or do any look at me and then jump off a high building. None of that. Do you think it would be better if you can kind of choose between Mythic Plus and raiding? Or, well, I'll tell you what. I think what would be better is if you didn't feel the need to do the other content to do one well. So if you didn't feel the need to raid to do Mythic Plus well, and you didn't feel the need to do Mythic Plus to do raiding well, that would be better. How they achieve that is tricky, of course. I don't mind it if it's incidental as well, that you sort of want to do the other content. What I mind is when they deliberately put something in to encourage you to do both. Your only source of WoW income is gambling. Well, that's a bit careless, isn't it? You suspect islands will be the main source of Azerite. Well, if they're not, then they're not going to be a very popular form of content. I'm not saying because they're not fun, but, you know, they're not going to be fun enough to do them if they're not the major source. So I agree with you there, Kogi. I would be gobsmacked if they were not the major source of Azerite. Remove LFR. They will never remove LFR. Ever. Well, actually, okay. They're unlikely to. Very unlikely. You're up 650k based on this gambling. That's got to be just dumb luck. There's no skill to it. The reason why people have an aversion to LFR is because there can be no doubt it reduces the number of people who want to join raiding guilds and do more organised raiding. But that being said, it's also an accessible form of content that I think in the modern MMO is fairly important. I mean, you look at all these MMOs that try and bill themselves as being like a bit more hardcore, or you've got to work at it, you can't just... They generally don't get that many players playing them. Well, yes, actually, when you say from what you've seen, very few of those people you'd want in your raiding guild, but that's because they haven't learnt anything. You don't learn anything in LFR. I remember my first ever organised raid in Molten Core. I was a disaster area. I was a complete imbecile. I knew nothing, but I learnt. I learnt fairly quickly, you know, but I would never have learnt without that experience. It's the same thing with the majority of LFR players. They're not going to learn in LFR. There's no learning curve in there. The only skills you need to learn is how not to get kicked, and that's not an exact science. I mean, I thought I would get kicked on that Coven LFR I was doing yesterday, because as soon as we wiped on that, it was like 10% or something. I thought that's it. They're gonna kick the bottom 3 DPS, which I was one, but they didn't, so it's okay. LFR, no, LFR does not push players to improve. There's no need to. I mean, Preach all the way back in MOP, which was the first full expansion with it. That came out at the end of Cataclysm, but the first full expansion where LFR was a proper thing. And he did that experiment in Throne of Thunder, didn't he? Where he just went in there and deliberately did nothing. In fact, he did worse than nothing. He deliberately did nothing and stood in shit. And in the whole thing, he only got kicked once. Doing all the sort of LFR, you know, sections, zones, things. Just to show how, you know, how little input is required from you. I mean, if everyone was like that, sure, nothing would die. But the fact that anyone can do that and they're not going to get kicked that often and therefore they're going to succeed. I mean, I used to, in WoD, in the first tier, I'm not proud of it, but I did it anyway. When I was wanting to sort of gear up a few alts, I used to, like with my 2 different accounts, go into LFR, different LFRs, I didn't queue up at the same time, different LFRs, and I would queue them, and I'd be in an LFR at the same time on both of them, and I would go onto one, I would play it for 20 seconds, and then I'd go onto the other, play it for 20 seconds, just so that I would appear on the damage meter somewhere. So I couldn't be accused of being AFK, and if I died on one of them, bargain, I would just go on to the other and just play that a bit more. If someone rezzed me on the other one, I would accept it and get back and stuff like that, and I'd be playing 2 at once, just because I didn't have to do anything amazing. I could gear up to, I could do 2 characters at once, sort of. I mean, I don't do it anymore because I think even at the time I was a bit ashamed of myself. You did LFR dogs the other day on Destro. You were 2 million DPS ahead of the next person. Well, you will be. I mean, the character I was doing it on yesterday, my warrior, is so badly geared that I only sim 600 K DPS on like a patchwork sim. You know, I can't even sim 1 million, let alone do 1 million. Let alone 2 million. So, but you know, that's the state. I mean, but I've got enough item level to queue up for it. I'm not cheating my way into it by having a load of high level BOEs in my bag, which is a trick I used to employ. No, you don't go into LFR to learn anything. That's what I mean. I think that is why some people do have a valid objection to LFR. But I just think, you know, I wouldn't get rid of it. I wouldn't support getting rid of it because it does serve. There are. It's one of those things like there's two types of player that exclusively do LFR. There's the type of player that do it because it allows them to get their raid gear. They would do more organised raiding if it was the only way to do it, but they're not bothered enough to do it if the LFR is on hand. In other words, the ones that want to take the path of least resistance. And then there's the ones who wouldn't do anything if it weren't for LFR. And those are the ones Blizzard create it for. They create it on the assumption that the sort of people who want to do organised raiding will do. But the problem is the game doesn't encourage them to. Because how do people try and access that organised raiding? You pug normal or heroic rather than join a guild. But ideally what the game would do is encourage you to join a guild for that. But it doesn't. Oh yeah, you get snapped at for offering advice. Never offer advice. I learnt that lesson years ago. Never offer advice. The only time you should ever offer any advice, and it will be purely general, if you wipe on a boss, then it's fine to say, okay, the reason we wiped on the boss is because we weren't doing this. Can we do this now, please? That you get away with. But offering someone specific advice on how to play their class, never do that in LFR or any pug, come to think of it. Never. Because the chances of them appreciating that advice is very low. It feeds the entitlement culture in WoW. Maybe, or maybe it's just that there is an entitlement culture. It's one of those things. I don't like to use the phrase which came first, the chicken or the egg, because I know the answer to it. But, you know, in terms of what the metaphor's supposed to indicate, it's very difficult to know, is Blizzard feeding an entitlement culture or is it responding to the entitlement culture? I would suggest it's just responding to the culture that was already developing. When you first went to LFR and you hunted, you asked the dude destroying the meters, how do I do what you do? The guy invited you to his guild and started your raiding career. That would be very unusual. But that way can work. Like if you want to ask someone some advice on the class, that's fine. But don't ever offer the advice because usually, yeah, the people will not be happy. What's the answer? The egg. Chickens come from eggs. So therefore the egg had to come first. But the egg didn't have to come from chicken parents. The egg could have been a mutation or the result of two similar chicken species, but not the same, breeding together that were sexually compatible. So it came from an egg first. You do like how they removed certain items from LFR and made it normal above. Yeah, but then they put it back, didn't they? Well, I was talking about this last night. I would actually like if they didn't want to do... Where does the chicken egg come from? Two non-chicken parents. You know, they were either the same species as each other and there was a mutation, or it was more likely two different species, because, you know, you do get interspecial, you know, sex happening. Sometimes it breeds offspring, not all of which are infertile. So, it's, you know, easily could have been that. But yeah, so I was saying last night in LFR, like this war mode, I love this war mode idea of filling up a bar. So what if LFR, even if they didn't want to do it for the higher raiding modes, what if in LFR you didn't get random loot off the bosses, you got points towards completing this bar. And at the end of the bar, you got a piece of loot from that raid, not attached to that boss. You had a complete set of LFR loot. You had a complete LFR loot table that was not the same as normally heroic and mythic, just like we had in WoD. All right, but this time you didn't get as random drops. You got a bar fill up. Now the question then could come: what do you do about coins? But the coins could still work. The coins could still give you a chance to get some loot straight up. Had no, not with the bar. And if you were unsuccessful, then maybe it gives you some, whatever it's going to give you in a BfA, presumably Azerite. And maybe it adds on another little bit to your bar. Maybe less than the boss kill, but another little bit to your bar. And the bar fills up, you get a piece of gear. Do you know what? I like that idea so much I'm going to do a video on it. I like that. Except I'll probably forget. Every time I talk... Do you know what? Every week I seem to say 2 or 3 things that I think I should do a video on that. Then I forget. I need to sit down and watch these again and make notes. Or maybe make notes while I'm doing it, but I haven't got anything to do that at the moment. Well, Kisashi, regardless of the actual mechanic of producing the first chicken, no, the egg has to come first. It's simple. And that's one of the first questions I ask in my student. Whenever I get a new class of students, I always ask them 3 questions, just to let them know they're in a science class. And even bright, and I haven't, even bright students get stung by them. I will ask them which came first, the chicken or the egg, and woe betide them if they can't answer me. I will ask them why leaves are green, and I will ask them what is science. And it's very rare that any of them are able to answer them. Occasionally, they do, but it's very rare. No, Kisashi, you can't sue that. That's how you get yourself fired. The only reasonable explanation to the chicken coming first is some sort of rapid mutation that happens within a lifetime of an animal. No, no. Only in Marvel Comics does that happen. But yeah, and in terms of LFR, they're not doing themselves any favours for encouraging people to do normal modes or heroic modes if they make LFR an easy version of them. I mean, of course it needs to be the same boss as an easy version, but it's a loot-based game. They've got to do something fundamentally different and less satisfying with the loot. The proto-chicken were very similar to the chicken. Yes, they'd presumably have to be quite similar to the chicken. Well, originally they may have been raptors, yes. But I don't think 2 raptors gave birth to a chicken. Apart from anything else, it would have eaten its own offspring. I have to answer the 3 questions. It's perfectly simple. I've already answered the which came first, the chicken or the egg. The reason why leaves are green, people will put their hands up, pleased as they like, and say, because it contains chlorophyll. To which I would say, so why is chlorophyll green? At which point, they start to struggle. But the reason is because this thing is designed to trap light. The shorter wavelength light is higher energy. But the issue is that, blue light isn't always... It won't always capture enough blue light throughout the day. Green light... It's one of those things, like in the daytime, all the types of light are coming through. And blue light is the best, highest energy. But there comes a point where because the blue light will be reflected off into space first. Which is why you see the red sky at night or in the morning. That's where the blue and green light is basically being reflected into space. You almost never see a green sky because it happens very rapidly. But there's a period of time where there's still sunlight, it's just predominantly red. So it needs to be sensitive to that as well. So effectively what you've got is something that reflects green light because it's not of any use to it. When green light's available, blue light's also available. And when blue light isn't available, red light is what's predominantly available. Is it green or do our eyes perceive it as green? Well, it's the same colour that we all agree is green, even if we see it differently. And then what is science? It's simply the methodical study of natural phenomena. Actually, I was quite upset with 2 of my classes this year when it came onto it and we were doing enthalpy. And 2 of my classes couldn't tell me what temperature was. One of my students was even careless enough to try and tell me it was the same as heat, which I had to stop everyone and explain in careful detail. I was not happy. You were against LFR until you saw a streamer who queued with a pre-made for LFR -1 player. It was Argus, and so it had the cutscene. They waited until it finished and asked him how he liked the cutscene, and he said it was awesome. And he did Argus twice just to watch it. You could watch it on YouTube though, can't you? But it just amazes me because people will use words in science correctly. They'll use the terms largely correctly. But it amazes me how sometimes even quite bright students don't actually know what those words mean. I mean, I get this all the time with comments like people, you know, I sometimes have to have my dictionary corner, although sometimes I don't do it because it's, you know, I would just come off as being a dick if I did. But the number of times people misunderstand me because some words in English have multiple definitions. I had a comment this weekend actually where someone clearly misunderstood a word I was using because they were thinking it means one thing when it actually means 4 different things. What is heat or temperature? Heat is a form of energy, and temperature is the potential for heat energy to flow from that point in space. So if you've got a region of space which has a high temperature, it means it's got a large likelihood for heat to flow from it. So it's a measure of potential. You know, temperature to heat is what voltage, or, you know, not so much voltage because that's a potential difference, but electrical potential is to charge. Actually, Argus is not bad on the pug. Agrimar is more of a problem, but usually people don't wipe on it a lot. Coven is by far the worst in LFR. But you don't have to do Coven to do Argus. This is a different one. You'd like to say half the players never check anything outside the game. Blizzard's estimation is that a maximum of 20% of people check anything outside the game. And I would not disagree with them. They might not know their definition. We don't really learn words by their definition. Yeah, but you're supposed to. When I was growing up, I was told when you come across a word you don't understand, you look it up in your dictionary. And that way you don't just learn one definition, you learn all of them. That's what I was told. You're reading a book and you don't understand a word, you go for the dictionary. If my parents used a word and I said to them, what does that mean? They wouldn't tell me. They'd make me go and look it up in the dictionary. You don't need to know the origin of a word to use it correctly now. It is fun knowing the origin of a word, but you don't need to know now. But it is useful to remember that there is more than one definition for many English words. And you know, it reduces the number of misunderstandings if you are aware of them. Like if someone says something which I don't think makes sense, I still today will look up words if I just think maybe it's got a different definition from one I'm familiar with. Oh, language did exist. Dictionaries, the first dictionary was written in Georgian times. So, in other words, late 18th century. And in fact, it wasn't even a comprehensive dictionary. Samuel Johnson wrote the first one. It contained specifically obscure words in the English language. So it wasn't intended to contain all of them. Just the most obscure ones that people might not be that familiar with. And of course, English itself is a very much a mongrel language that adapted to be able to trade with different countries. You know, some countries it was trading with were from the sort of like the west of Europe, which sort of developed from Greek and Latin, but also to the east and southeast from the more Germanic languages as well. So it basically, English became a hybrid language. So there's loads of different definitions for some of the words. Oh yeah, I like that quote, Safian. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. I sometimes have to use that myself. It's such a great phrase. But it's so often true. I don't think that word means what you think it does. In fact, I've had to use that in the last week on a comment. All words by definition are made up, but you know. Someone had to look at a rock and go, rock, at some point. In fact, we were having an argument. I remember at school having an argument about dragons. Are dragons real? And like the dragons of fantasy, the fire-breathing monsters, of course, are not real. But what I was arguing was, but dragons are real because there are animals that are called dragons. You know, and if there's an animal that's called a dragon and it's a real animal, then dragons are real. It's just not because we've called it that. That's what it is. It's just not the dragons that you think, the fire-breathing beasties you think about with like St. George and stuff like that. And those definitions, well, you say that, yeah, language is just a culmination of what people accept as words with agreed upon definitions, which can also change over time as well. A lot of words that people think about as being American English as opposed to what's used in Britain now, some of them were used in Britain a couple of centuries ago, and then they just dropped out of common usage, but then they remained in usage in America, that's all. So drapes for curtains, for example, used to be used. Fall for autumn. You know, we used to say fall in Britain as well, but now we don't. We just say autumn. And then we have all sorts of modern usages of words which are confusing at the best of times, like saying wicked for good and in it at the end of a sentence just to denote that you finish your sentence, even when you're not even asking a question. Chav's from Leicester mostly. I don't think we invented that word, Diablo. I have heard an origin for that word. I don't know whether it's true or not. It's quite funny though. Japanese follows its own rules. Does it? English does not. It's not as bad as Latin though. Latin followed almost no rules. There were so many rules for Latin and almost none of them were followed. It was a lawless language. We weren't using longbows so much in the 1800s. You have to go back to like the 14th century for those. Your first day in university, they asked us, if you are on a boat on a lake and throw a rock in the water, will the level rise, stay the same, or go down? Sorry, but Leicester is full of chavs. That's all there is to it. Not as bad as Essex, obviously, if I want to upset another county. The origin, apparently, I've heard, I don't know whether this is true, by the way. Apparently, the origin of the F word is it was used to shame jailed rapists, that they would be written on their cells and stuff, and it stood for forced, unclean, carnal knowledge. I don't know whether it's true, but it's believable. Blue foxes will not be at my door. Leicester have got no reason at all to come to Scunthorpe. Not even close to being in the same division. Very good, Kisasha. That's the question you'd need to ask. But of course, if the rock is in the boat and then you throw it into the lake, then the weight that's lost in the boat has now entered the water, so it's still in there. Have I seen the clever kid test answer stuff? What do you mean? I don't know what that is, if that's an actual thing. I don't think, Elben, that can make any sense, because if a word's going to be an acronym, the first letter of the acronym can't be the full word. That wouldn't make any sense. Oh, that as a form of, yes, that would, well, that allegedly came from the Agincourt, well, the French, against the French campaign, the Henry V campaign, but that was, you know, well before the 1800s. I'm going to be a bit dicey here. That was either the 15th or the 14th century. I suspect the 14th century. Long time ago. And by the 1800s, we had muskets, rifles and cannon. Longbows wouldn't have been of much use. But yes, the story goes, again, I don't know whether this is true. The story goes, it's because those are the fingers you use to knock back the arrow in a longbow. And the longbow was by far the most fearsome weapon. It was the weapon of, well, not exactly mass destruction, but it was the most fearsome weapon on the battlefield at the time. And the British longbowmen were particularly feared. But there was another story that went that when captured, they would cut off that finger. But that definitely wasn't true, because the French were far too honourable for that. There were like articles of war that would have specifically forbidden that practice. So that definitely isn't true. So I also don't know whether the whole thing is true or not. Well, if you watch Father Ted, they say feck. I don't know how widespread that actually is in Ireland. But, you know. Because I don't think I'd ever come across it before I watched Father Ted. Regarding recursive acronyms, there's always PHP. Why, what's PHP? You're not going to tell me the first P stands for PHP. Have I ever heard of a podcast called Hardcore History? I don't think so. PHP stands for PHP Hypertext Processor. Does it really? What the hell? Who would come up with that nonsense? How the hell can the first... No. So what does the second PHP mean? Okay, so it's personal homepage hypertext processor. Fine. All right. As long as the second PHP actually has some sensible meaning, then. So the second PHP is a different PHP to the first PHP. Every Blizzard game is updating. It's not on mine. I am familiar with Weird Al Yankovic, yes. I'm not sure I remember Bob, though. Talking literary terms, I quite like his Word Crime song, though. I have actually played a version of that to my class. I did have to edit out one line, though, because it's hugely politically incorrect, and I would not get away with playing that into a class of students. But the rest of it is actually pretty good. I do show them that. But yeah, I do like a bit of Weird Al. Well, I don't have any non-World of Warcraft. I suppose I have Diablo 3. That's still on install. I haven't installed it on this computer, obviously. So that tells you how long ago it is since I played that. So I have... The only Blizzard game I've got installed on this computer is several different versions of World of Warcraft. 3 different versions, in fact. The PTR, the Alpha, and the main game. Do I prefer Def Leppard with 1 arm or 2? I have no particular preference. Oh, the Trapped in the Drive-Thru. I don't know. I can't decide whether it's genius or tedious with that one. Another good one is Stop Sending That Crap to Me. I sometimes feel the need to send that to people in response to nonsense. I almost felt the need to send that to my ex-partner, but in the end we broke up, so that sorted that problem out. But anyway, I'm going to call an end to this one now. So I think we've definitely exhausted all the Warcraft topics for this week. So thanks for coming on, everyone. I'll be obviously streaming tomorrow again, hopefully Guild Raid again. Hopefully we have fewer wipes on the easier bosses, we shall see. Hopefully I can persuade them to go for personal loot as well. That'd be quite good. You're still going, maybe. I'm not. So I'm gonna close this one down. But yes, thanks for coming on, everyone. Until next time, I will see you later. I'm gonna get off and maybe see if I can do another video quick tonight.